Thank you for listening to the Station of the Cross, proclaiming the fullness of truth with clarity and charity.
Heard around the world on your Android and Apple mobile devices.
The simple truth, rising up to explore the difficult topics of real life. Join us as we proclaim the good, the true, and the beautiful with the simple truth of Jesus Christ and His Holy Catholic Church through Scripture, tradition, and the Catechism. And now, your host, Jim Havens.
Great to be back with you on The Simple Truth. We consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong heart of St. Joseph. Today is Testimony Tuesday, where we bring you real, live, first-hand testimonial accounts of the life-giving reality of Jesus and His Catholic Church. Our guest today is Jason Evert, prolific speaker and author. He and his wife, Kristalina, run Chastity Project, chastity.com, the podcast Lust is Boring, and lead an international alliance of young people who promote purity in more than 40 countries. And today we're going to hear the first-hand story behind the man. Jason, outstanding to have you with us to share some of your personal testimony today. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you for having me on.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. We always begin with the beginning, your childhood, your early life. What was it like, your family, the culture that you grew up in?
Yeah, well, I was raised in a good Catholic family. I got one brother, one sister. My parents raised us Catholic, and so we would go to daily mass, or not daily mass, but weekly mass every Sunday. Same part of the church, same pew, same mass. There was just that consistency and a spiritual routine. My father's spirituality, I think, was a bit. He's more, of German descent, more, to himself in a sense. A man of prayer, but not so overtly, one to talk about it and talk about feelings about it. It's just it's something you do, something you live, and you keep it to yourself. My mom comes from more an Irish Catholic background. Her parents had 10 kids. Her parents' names were Joseph and Mary, and so it's kind of hard to beat that for an Irish Catholic family. And so that was kind of their upbringings. And so, raised in that environment, we'd pray grace before meals and Sunday Mass. And that was, for the most part, the extent of the devotional practices of my family growing up. But, still good values and, those kinds of things, lots of good family time, just a happy upbringing with a mother and father that just loved each other. But I wouldn't say my conversion really began until more high school time, when I was kind of living a bit of a double life. I had to go to confirmation class. And so, it was like, okay, you're a junior in high school, you get confirmed. Okay. And it was at that point that, the faith started to catch my attention, that, I had my friends outside of church, and then I had my friends kind of inside of church now, and they were very different. The lifestyle I was leading in those two separate places, there's a lot of divergence there. And I think God made us rational beings so that we want our beliefs and our behaviors to line up. And for a lot of young people, they don't. And that dissonance, so to speak, of like, I'm believing this thing, but I'm behaving that way, we've got to change one of them. And more often than not, I think it's easier to change your beliefs than your behavior. And so I think that's why a lot of people just leave the faith, because, I don't want to change the behavior. But I was just real blessed to have a really solid life teen group at our parish, with just a very faithful, orthodox, sincere, devout youth minister and a good evangelistic pastor. And I think that really began the quest with my conversion.
Mm-hmm. And this would have been in California, is that right?
Well, I was raised in Arizona, and then eventually moved out to San Diego after going to Franciscan University.
Okay, so not till later for California. So Arizona, so what was the culture like there? Wider than your parents then, but in the parish culture, in the school, was it public or Catholic school that you were going to?
Well, somewhere in between. It was a Jesuit high school, so it was Catholic, but spirituality, faith-wise, God bless them. I don't think they were always in line with what the church teaches on many things. Academically, a very solid, program that they had in the school. Theologically, perhaps not so strong now that I look back. At the time, I didn't realize, what I wasn't getting until I finished high school and ended up at Franciscan University of Steubenville. But in high school, there were opportunities for spiritual growth in my high school. I don't think I took advantage of Curcio, They had different types of retreats for the high school kids. Kairos was one of them, but just wasn't tapping into that. But then in my youth group, through the confirmation program, started Discover Life Teen, going to the weekly prayer nights. They had Wednesday Eucharistic adoration and rosary before the Blessed Sacrament. And, at the time, there's a girl I was kind of interested in the youth group, and it's like, oh, adoration, she goes on Wednesdays. I like adoration too, So, God was like, okay, if that's where I got to draw you in, that'll work for me. But almost used that as a bait to catch my heart, so to speak, that even when that person moved on in life, I had realized what she had already discovered, which was the beauty of the faith, the beauty behind it all. And so, but, it was a real wrestling period because wait a minute, I got these friends who are my buddies at school, but what we're doing on Saturday isn't quite lining up what we're doing on Sunday. I remember being with some of them. We were at Arizona State University, and there's a place called Mill Avenue. And that's where the bars and clubs and all that stuff is. And we were just hanging out, and there was a street corner preacher there. And we went up to him, a couple buddies and I just started talking to the guy. And he said, well, we're Catholic, you're Protestant, potato. And he's like, oh, no. He said, you're Catholic? And we're like, well, yeah. And he said, the Catholic Church is the whore of Babylon. I'm like, well, I didn't know that. And he said, oh, yeah, your Pope is the Antichrist. And I'm like, well, that's new information for me. And he said, well, yeah, he has the number 666 right there on his papal hat. And I'm like, well, I don't remember seeing that at World Youth Day, but if you say so, I guess it's there. And then he's like, well, do you believe in the Bible? And I'm like, yeah, the Bible. It's great. That's a good book, good author, everything. And he said, well, don't you Catholics think that Mary was always a virgin? And I thought, okay, yeah, Mary, ever virgin, yeah. And he said, well, look here, the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13, right here, this verse, Jesus has brothers and sisters. Now explain that to me. Who's right, the Bible or your church? And I had no clue how to answer the guy. I didn't know the Greek. I couldn't pull out, the Greek word is adelphoi, which can mean nephew or cousin or relative. I didn't know how to explain it. And he dropped it humbly and just went on. Well, what about the Pope? Can you show me the Pope in the Bible? Where's purgatory? And I didn't have a clue how to answer the guy. And so I kind of went home with my tail between my legs, asking myself, why am I even Catholic? And then I figured it out. I'm Catholic because my parents are Catholic. If they were Buddhist, I'd be Buddhist. If they were Episcopalian, I would be too. And I realized it's kind of a lame reason to believe anything. And so it kind of sent me on a quest. And so I began reading the scriptures. I read the Bible from beginning to end. But I figured, look, there's 30,000 different denominations. They all disagree on what's right and wrong. And they all love God and using the same book. Who's right? So I figured, well, who's the least likely to get it messed up, what Jesus meant? And I figured, well, it's probably the first people that heard him. So I said, well, let's go read the early Christians. And I started discovering the early church fathers and how amazed I was to discover they were all Catholic. I mean, we've got the writings of John the Apostle's disciple, Ignatius of Antioch, saying wherever Jesus Christ is, there is the Catholic Church, talking about the real presence and the Bishop of Rome. They were all fully Catholic from the start. And so that just sent me on a deeper quest to learn about the lives of the saints. And it just, I think, snowballed from then, where he just kind of, the more I came to learn, the more truth I discovered, the more beautiful I understood God's plan was for humanity.
Mm-hmm. And was this before receiving the sacrament of confirmation, or was this after?
Shortly after, I would say. Before confirmation, I was like, okay, we kind of got to do this thing. And then started to get more interested, discovering the youth group. And then ended up shortly after, we got confirmed when we were juniors in high school. And I had a couple friends going over to Franciscan University of Steubenville. And I'm like, what's that? Stupidville. And I know Steubenville. I'm like, oh, well, what is that? And, I had signed up to go to Arizona State University, but a month before school was starting, my family had a vacation out to Pennsylvania, visit some other family. And Ohio, Franciscan was only a couple hours away. So I'm like, well, let's just drive over and look at the campus. And, we got there, it was pretty empty. There wasn't much going on, but something clicked in me, this is where you're supposed to be. And I literally applied with literally weeks left before the semester started, got accepted, skipped out of ASU, went to Steubenville last minute, and thanks be to God. And I think right there, where was the soil was the most rich for me in terms of spiritual growth. Not only academically what you were learning, but the example you were seeing from the other guys in the dorms on how they live their own prayer lives. I remember coming back on a date with my girlfriend at the time. I was maybe I don't know if I was a junior or something in college, and came back on a date. It was probably 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning. We're coming back from Pittsburgh, and we decided to go into an adoration chapel downtown Steubenville. we go into the church, late at night, and, get into adoration. There's only one person there before the Blessed Sacrament, some guy sitting in front of the monstrance, and I kind of lean over and look, and it's my professor, Dr. Scott Hahn. And he's sitting there 1 o'clock in the morning with the Bible on his lap before the master. And to me, that spoke more to me than 4 years of sitting in his classrooms. It's not just simply some lecture he's delivering it. He's sitting at the feet of his master, learning and continuing to be that disciple and that student. And so it wasn't just what you were learning in the books in the class. It was the witness that you were seeing lived out in the lives of the teachers, the priests, and the students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. So, I know we're heading into the break, but I want to take a moment here just to invite the listeners to just notice a couple things. I mean, I hope that this is resonating with you. There's so much here resonating with me. Every time we're here on Tuesday hearing testimonies, we are on some holy ground, hearing these stories, these real stories of how Jesus is drawing people to him and how they're responding and what's taking place in all of that interaction. And one thing I guess I want to point out here is just that questioning, that quest that Jason was talking about as a young person is where it jumped out for him, right? He was in high school and he was challenged by a Protestant preacher and it sent him on this quest. That is a very good thing, right? Something that sparked that questioning. Why am I Catholic? Do I really believe this? What is it that the church really teaches? Is the church real? Is Jesus real? And if Jesus is real, then where is he? Is this the church that he instituted? What about all of these other Protestant denominations? Going on that quest is key. Right. And so if it didn't happen as a young person, for someone who might be listening right now, maybe you've never thought about it that deeply before, I want to encourage you. There is so much more to understand about this reality that we are in. Jesus and his Catholic Church are the real deal. When we get back, we're going to dive into more on Jason's story. He's a fantastic storyteller, as you can hear, and he's going to share more about how he came to know and fall in love with Jesus. We'll be right back on The Simple Truth. Stay tuned.
Prayer of Deliverance. Almighty God and Father, we beg thee, through the intercession and help of the archangels, Saint Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel, for the deliverance of our brothers and sisters who are enslaved by the evil one, from anxiety, sadness, and obsessions.
We implore thee, deliver us, O Lord.
From hatred, fornication, and envy.
We implore thee, deliver us, O Lord.
From thoughts of jealousy, rage, and death.
We implore thee, deliver us, O Lord.
From every thought of suicide and abortion.
We implore thee, deliver us, O Lord.
From every form of sinful sexuality.
We implore thee, deliver us, O Lord.
From every division in our family and every harmful friendship.
We implore thee, deliver us, O Lord.
From every sort of spell, malefice, witchcraft, and every form of the occult.
We implore thee, deliver us, O Lord.
Thou who said, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you," grant that through the intercession of the Virgin Mary, we may be liberated from every demonic influence and enjoy thy peace always. In the name of Christ our Lord. Amen.
Hello, this is Father Frank Pavone of Priests for Life. The Associated Press recently interviewed Nebraska Dr. Leroy Carhart and Colorado Dr. Warren Hearn, both of whom spoke about how they perform abortions in the third trimester of pregnancy. Abortions in the 7th, 8th, and 9th months of pregnancy are in fact happening legally in America. Many Americans find that hard to believe. Nobody should ever be allowed to deny it again. This is Father Frank Pavone, National Director of Priests for Life.
I didn't take my faith seriously, which probably means I never really got it to begin with. No, I didn't want to give up sin. I mean, the reason we sin is because sin is fun. But it's self-love sin. But it's amazing with God's grace how easy trying to not sin it really is.
If you've been away from the Catholic Church for whatever reason, we invite you to take another look. Visit CatholicsComeHome.org today.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here. Our guest today is Jason Evert, prolific speaker and author. Maybe you've heard him deliver one of his fantastic talks on the virtue and gift of chastity, on purity. sexual integrity. He and his wife, Kristalina, run Chastity Project, chastity.com. The podcast Lust is Boring, and lead an international alliance of young people who promote purity in more than 40 countries. Jason is kind enough to be with us to share some of his personal testimony, his story with us today. Jason, before the break, we were getting into this rich time of diving into your faith coming alive at Franciscan University. I want to ask you a question, just take it back a little bit one more time to the high school experience that you had in this sort of quasi-Catholic Jesuit school. At what point, I think this is a very important area that often doesn't get linked up, especially in a place that may not be an Orthodox place, where we miss out on one of the most essential truths about our faith in the sacramental life that Jesus died to give us, and that is an understanding of sanctifying grace, right? An understanding of mortal sin, an understanding of the proper disposition to receive the Eucharist, which is vital, because if we don't understand that, then we can easily fall into all kinds of problems and not really know our way back, right? So when did that start to make sense to you? When did you learn that? And was that something that was a moment or was a process? Do you recall anything along those lines?
Yeah, without question for me, it's always been more of a process than some lightning bolt, St. Paul moment, revelation. It was just this, lifestyle I had led, I think, prior to youth group, prior to confirmation of, okay, I'm out with my buddies and we're vandalizing and we're cussing and we're degrading women in our speech and we're looking at pornography and, trading swimsuit and porn magazines and this and that. And then I'm going to church and learning all this other stuff. So it wasn't so much simply an intellectual of, is this true? And, where is the evidence of why I should believe? So it wasn't simply an intellectual conversion, although that was going on. It wasn't simply in the brain, it was in the body. It was in the behavior of just like, okay, this is not aligning with that. And so I had the stuff, the pornography, and, knew this isn't right, knew this isn't good, but didn't necessarily know how to get rid of it, let alone have the motivation to want to get rid of it. And surrounding myself with friends who I thought were doing worse things than I was, I thought, okay, I'm pretty good because they're a lot worse, right? I'm a good person. I'm somewhere between Mother Teresa and Osama bin Laden, kind of right there in the middle. And that's kind of a comfortable spot to be in. We'll sit there. But like the things would happen and I would just realize how disconnected my life was. I remember driving home with my best friend at the time from high school, and he pulls his car into the parking lot of a pornographic adult bookstore. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, I want to go in a little nudie bookstore. And I'm like, don't go in there, you filthy little pervert. And he's like, well, I'm going in there. And I'm like, well, I'm not going in there. I'm not some perv. My porn's at home, and I'm sitting there like 5 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. Like, what is going on in there? And I look at my watch, and I've got a confirmation class to be at a church soon, but I'm sitting in the parking lot of some filthy bookstore waiting for my best friend to get out. And it kind of dawned on me, like, Jason, you might have a lot of good friends, but you don't have friends that are good. And in my opinion, like, you always become like your friends. A friend of mine says friends are like elevators. They either take you up or take you down. And I was spending a lot of my time in that elevator that was only bringing me down. And it was difficult because as I started to be more drawn to the spiritual stuff, but then I had all my buddies kind of anchored in this boat. It was almost like having a foot on the dock and a foot on the boat, and the boat's just drifting. And I'm starting to do the splits here. And it's like, okay, I've got to pick one or the other. I'm just going to end up in the water between the both and having neither. And it wasn't as if I gave the guys a call and say, okay, I'm no longer hanging out with you because, you don't go to church enough. It was more, I just started spending more time in the church stuff with the youth group friends, going on retreats, things like that. So it was a very gradual transition socially for me, as opposed to just kind of a cutting it off cold turkey kind of thing, and just started spending more time on that. And, when you're spending time with the right kind of people, you just feel better about yourself when it's all done. You don't wake up in the morning like, oh, I can't believe I did that last night. Just the guilt wasn't there. The shame wasn't there. And there was a fear at first, like, well, some of these people at church are weird. A friend reassured me, he said, look, you're going to meet holy people that are weird, but he said, look, they were weird before they were holy. And so that's at least some consolation, but realize that God wasn't trying to stick me into some kind of mold. If anything, sin is what puts you in a mold. Like, sin is what robs you of your individuality, because you look at the worst sinners in the universe, like the drug cartel members and the child abusers, like they're literally like clones of each other. And then you look at the saints, And it's like how radiantly unique they are in their humanity, because sainthood is what I say is like the full bloom of the human personality. And so for me, it was definitely not like a lightning bolt moment. It was just a whole series of experiences of wanting to bring, my beliefs into alignment with my behavior, as I gradually began to learn what my beliefs should be. So those two, conversion stories are, I think, going on at the same time, the beliefs and the behavior.
Yeah, that makes sense. The head and the heart, a lot going on in all of us all the time. And so, yeah, to have some sense of that, it would be interesting if it was just an intellectual pursuit. But the fact is yes, there are sins that we are attached to. Was there anything in terms of, you're talking about pornography there and sin in your life? Was there a time that you remember a great confession, entering into that, or a difficulty in being able to finally go to confession and hand that over and begin anew, saying, I don't want to do this anymore, and I'm ready to reject this and move forward in some new life in Christ here?
Yeah, I mean, it was St. Ignatius of Loyola and his spiritual exercises talking about the tactics that the devil uses with us. And he says, in many ways, the evil spirit is kind of like a seductress, an adulteress. And the affair can survive as long as it's hidden. Because once light is shown on the affair and the mistress becomes exposed, everything is ruined in the affair. And he said, so it's the same respect with the way that the evil spirit wants to operate with us. He wants his conniving and his strategies, everything to be done in the dark. It's you against him, and it's not disclosed to anyone else. That's why one saint said, that a sin disclosed is half overcome, meaning half of the journey we need to take in breaking free from these addictions is just accountability, about bringing that into the light, so that other people can give us input and advice and support and encouragement. And so for me, it was very much in the dark. And then I remember one day, I was probably, I don't know, maybe a sophomore in high school. I don't remember what age I was, maybe a junior. And I had all my pornography hidden up in my attic. I had a little crawl space at the top of my attic, which is like 9 feet tall up there. There's a little door you can pop open, a bunch of insulation up there. And I would stash all the pornography up there. And then, when no one was around, climb up there and pull it on down and look at it. And so I thought I was all being super secretive here. And then one day, I remember sitting on the carpet just playing with our dog at the time, and my mom's in the next room, and I don't think anyone else was home. It's probably like 9 o'clock at night, and she says, Jason, I just want to just mention something to you. I was in your room the other day, and I saw something up in your attic, and at that point, my brain just like shut off. Like, I can't believe my mom found my porn stash. Like, I was just mortified, just humiliated and embarrassed and grossed out. I just wanted to like crawl out of my skin. And, she didn't give me some super long lecture. It was just basically like, this is a Christian home. We don't have that stuff in our home. And I threw it all away. And I don't know that I said much. Well, okay, and then I, went upstairs, and first thing I did is climb up there and to see, hey, did she miss anything? And no, she didn't. Like, it was all gone. And then just stood there in like wonder and amazement, like, how did my mom sniff that stuff out? Dude, she's like 5 feet tall. How does she even get up there? It's like these Catholic moms have like these superpowers of perception, intuition, or whatever. But it was gone. And, thanks be to God, she, in a sense, did what I felt like I couldn't do, that just to get rid of that stuff. And back then it was kind of easy, because if you threw it away, it wasn't back on your internet the next day. Like, it was gone. It was in the dumpster. You had to go find it and seek it out. Unfortunately now, for a lot of people, it's just so much more tempting, because you don't have to go seek it out to go out of your way. I mean, you have to go out of your way to avoid the pornography now. And so it's a very different ballgame. And so I'm very grateful that I was able to get away from that vice back in high school, as opposed to having to wrestle with that beast nowadays, with it on the cell phones and laptops. I just thank God that he was able to break through to me before I got hooked on all that junk on the online. And so there's a special grace that I was able to get out before the whole internet became, really prevalent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've been talking a lot here in various episodes on the show about the battle of purity being connected with the battle of prayer. Can you talk a little bit about your prayer life during that time in high school and then going on into college? Obviously, things were coming alive for you at Franciscan, but how about that growth in prayer as you were advancing as a young person?
Yeah, I think it was St. Alphonsus Liguori said that when a raven finds a dead body, the first thing it does is pluck out the eyes And he said it's the same with the sin of impurity, that the first injury that the sin of impurity inflicts upon our soul is to take away the light of the things of God. Meaning, once, I start dabbling in all this impurity, if in a sense your soul is a window through which you see God, that gets tarnished and covered with tar and mud and all kinds of grime, and you can't see the things of God. Not only understanding the Blessed Trinity and the Catechism, but not even having an interest in that. And, it's just childish, superstition or whatever. But not only seeing God in the theology, but seeing God in other human beings, even seeing God in ourselves, that vision of him becomes so obscured. And that's why St. Alphonsus Liguori said that's the first injury inflicted upon the soul through impurity. But, as I began going to confession and opening up to this about priests and realizing, hey, maybe I'm not the only teenage guy on earth that's ever struggled with this stuff, it's almost as that window was beginning to get cleaned off. And I could see things a bit more clearly, and my prayer life began to improve. And, always thinking, I got to just pray, and then this stuff will go away. But it also works the other way as well, that if you just, ask God for the help, and you use the act of your will to do the exact opposite of what the evil one is telling you to do, the devil loses heart. But you've got to act with that firmness of will, and then we can grow so much more in the spiritual life. And so these things need to go together. But yeah, as in high school, as I said, our youth minister had a great devotion to the Blessed Sacrament. And so every week there was a holy hour with the rosary before the Blessed Sacrament. I just kind of got in the rhythm of that. Started going to daily mass maybe when I was about a junior in high school. And I haven't stopped going since to daily mass, 30 years later, whatever it is now. It just became a staple in my spiritual life that I was able, to carry through college, and then, God willing, even through adulthood.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Yeah. So while you were at Franciscan, what else was going on there? Were you having, I guess I wanted to ask this kind of jumped into my mind as you were speaking there about any sense of a moment or a time in the process where you began to see your identity more clearly, right? As a son of God, a son in the Son, a son of the Father, right? That where the Father really comes alive for you, and you see yourself as this adopted son in Jesus Christ, a temple of the Holy Spirit. Was there some emergence of that new identity in you? Was that coming alive at Franciscan?
It was, and I think primarily because we had something called households out there, which is kind of like a Christian fraternity is a way to think about it. And, when I was, I think, second semester my freshman year, joined a household called Conquer Through Love. And it was just the first band of really solid brothers I ever had in my life, spiritually speaking. In high school and youth group, we had some good guys that were good to hang out with, but getting to Steubenville and just finding other sons of the Father and just uniting in that brotherly love, that fellowship, helped me not only discover my role as the Son of God, but to discover these brothers in Christ that would help lead me to heaven as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what a blessing. When we get back, we'll start there with that holy brotherhood, that good community that we are all desiring, that our hearts are made for, that can be so difficult to find in our world. Jason was able to encounter that as a young person in college. We're going to talk about the fruits of that, the experience of that, when we get back, and much more on The Simple Truth. Stay tuned.
The Station of the Cross appreciates the generosity of our supporters. We are committed to keeping our donors' accounts up to date. If there have been changes made to your payment information, please call us so that we can update your account. 1-877-888-6279, extension 104. Or update your information online at thestationofthecross.com. Thank you for your generous support of Catholic Radio.
Are you concerned about the potential side effects to your health from using hormonal birth control? Learn a natural method of family planning that is 99% effective in postponing pregnancy and causes no risk to your health. Find all the information you need for natural family planning classes or the home study course from the Couple to Couple League website at www.ccli.org or call 513-471-2000, 513-471-2000.
30 seconds on the gifts of the Holy Spirit, brought to you by the Station of the Cross. The gift of fortitude aids us in remaining faithful to our vocation and the holy will of God. Do you ever wonder how it's possible for dedicated pro-lifers to persevere week in and week out praying in front of an abortion clinic? Or how married couples can see each other through long-term illnesses and relational difficulties? These individuals illustrate the gift of fortitude in action.
A fetus, Latin for little one, begins to develop fingerprints as early as its 10th week of gestation and become fully formed about the 17th week. With this in mind, let it never be said that your parents never left a lasting impression on you. Human life is sacred. Think about it. coalitionforlife.com.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here. Jason Evert is our guest today on this Testimony Tuesday. He is, you can find all of his work actually at Chastity Project, chastity.com, a very prolific speaker and author. You've likely heard of him, and if you haven't, then you are really in for a treat today hearing more of his story as we continue on here. But definitely check out the good work that he does along with his wife, Kristalina, chastity.com. So Jason, we left off before the break. You're at Franciscan University, a college student. You found the blessing of the household system there, where you're in this brotherhood of young guys where it's centered on Christ. You have some sort of like a simple rule of life, some commitments that you guys follow as, you know, you're all trying to put heaven as the end and this brotherhood oriented towards it. But you're also at this time in life with these guys where you're probably you got a lot of big questions, you know, that you're in, thinking about vocation and trying to discern what God's will is. Share with us a little bit more about that time.
Yeah, that was definitely going on in terms of vocational discernment. And it was a real blessing to have the brothers by your side through all of that, because I think especially as, you know, an adult man with a wife and kids and stuff, brotherhood is a piece that's kind of hard to keep in your life, because when you're, you know, in high school or college, you've got things to juggle, but it's like, okay, school, friends, maybe girlfriend, job, you know, that's it, you know, and job's a little part-time and you can juggle all those things. But then you graduate and it's like, okay, job's now full-time, and, you know, maybe a wife, and then I've got brothers in there, and then I've got, you know, charity work or church, and then it's one kid, and then it's two kids. Before you know it, it's like you're juggling 8 balls, and it's like, I can't keep all these in the air at one time. I've got to let go of one of them. And I think the one that usually drops is brotherhood, because I can't drop the wife, can't drop the kids, can't drop the work, can't drop this, that. And so then we end up kind of going Lone Ranger and not having a lot of the fellowship and the life that we need as adult men. And so as a college kid, it was just such a blessing that was sitting right in front of me in college. Because in a lot of universities, you've got to really seek that out, you know. And I always recommend to the college kids, as soon as you get to college, find the Newman Center, get plugged in. If there's a focused Bible study group, you know, St. Paul's Outreach, you know, get where the good people are. It's going to make a whole world of difference as you go through those college years. And so to find these solid guys who are also wrestling with their own vocations, because oftentimes as a young Catholic guy, if you're into your faith, there's almost this presumption sometimes among family members or friends back home, like, oh, well, you go to church a lot, you love God, so you're going to be a priest, right? And you start almost guilting yourself into that vocation of like, okay, well, everybody, I guess, seems to think I'm supposed to be a priest because I pray and everything, and I'm a guy. But then if you don't feel called to that, sometimes you almost guilt yourself into, well, maybe I'm being selfish and stingy with God by not going to the seminary, when I guess that's what prayerful guys are just supposed to do. But, you know, to me, that's not really how vocations are supposed to work, being motivated out of fear or guilt or whatever. And, you know, I went on a silent retreat, and, you know, there's a lot of vocational discernment encouraged on that retreat. And, you know, one thing that came to me is that, you know what, if I wanted to be a priest, as much as I want to be a husband and a father, well, I would have been in the seminary 5 years ago. And I think God speaks to us through our desires, and that our desires aren't a sign of necessarily our selfishness. Our desires are often, in fact, a gift from the Father, that passionate desire to be a husband, to be a father, to be a dad is his gift to me, not a sign of my stinginess toward him. Because imagine if you really wanted to be a priest and really didn't have that desire to be a husband and father, but thought, oh, well, St. Joseph was a husband, he's a father. I really want to be a priest, but, the greatest saints in the church were married, the Virgin Mary, St. Joseph, so I guess that's the route I got to go. That's not, to me, healthy discernment. And so I think sometimes, one of the most overlooked aspects of discernment as well is just action, right? So if you think you might be called to the priesthood, like legitimately, go on a discernment retreat, go spend a week at the seminary, go talk to other priests. How did you know what your vocation was? Because sometimes we get stuck in this like paralysis by analysis of like, we want to figure it all out in our minds instead of just by acting. It's almost like we have a seed in our hands and we're like, well, is it an apple seed or is it an orange seed? It could be an apple seed, but it might be like, they just put the thing in the ground, see what grows out of it. And so I think action is one of the most important parts of discernment. You think you might have a call? Go look into that. Go on some retreats, talk to some priests, dig, find, act, and then I think God's will come to the surface much more efficiently.
Mm-hmm. And then what came from there in your life as you're finishing up college then, and you're discerning, I guess, where to go from there? What is stirring within in terms of apostolic work or wherever God would be calling you? How did you discern, I guess, this sense of mission that you have so strongly and that you fulfill so well in all the good work that you do? Were the seeds all there germinating while you were a college student? How did that all come together?
Yeah, it was a gradual process for sure. And, in terms of just tying the ends there on the vocational question, I don't want to imply that, a priest is a man who doesn't want to have a wife and kids. If you have a priest who doesn't want to be a husband and a father, I don't think he'll be a very good priest, because that's what priesthood is giving yourself as a groom to your bride, the church, being a father to souls, that fatherly spousal desire must be present, I think, for a man to be a good priest. But in terms of like my, life's calling, it started to crystallize as I was in action, I would say, so to speak, doing ministry in college. I was leading a lot of high school retreats. And the kids, would really open up to me about all the brokenness going in their lives, their relationships, their parents' busted up marriages and unchastity and heartbreak. And I realized wow, they had no formation when it comes to chastity and human love. At the same time, I was doing 3 years of sidewalk counseling. So doing this crisis pregnancy work where you're talking to women who are having an abortion probably within the next 45 minutes. And after 3 years of doing that, I started feeling really late. Yeah, we'd save a baby here and there, which is fantastic, but I just felt like I'm late. I thought, why am I talking to this woman who's having an abortion in 45 minutes and she's 25 years old? Why couldn't I have spoken to her when she was 15 years old, before she ever met and dated this guy? Because maybe if she learned about chastity and real love then, she would have never ended up in this difficult situation. So instead of kind of throwing sandbags on the banks of a flooded river, I decided we have to go upstream to where kind of the dam is broken with unchastity. And while all this was going on, I was discovering the theology of the body, in particular, John Paul's book, Love and Responsibility. And I realized, this is the antidote. This is so clear. It's so beautiful. I started sharing that with the young people I'd be speaking to on these retreats, and the light bulb was going on. I mean, the kids, it resonated with them because it wasn't so much an imposition, these are the rules you got to follow. It was what is it your heart really longs for? Showing that connection between chastity and love. And so I was sharing this with the young people. And, at the time thinking, maybe I'll be a Christian marriage and family counselor. Maybe I'll be a theology teacher, maybe a high school guidance counselor, trying to figure out how I was going to share this, and ended up getting an internship with Catholic Answers the summer after my senior year in college. Did 3 months there, and then when it was over, they said, we want to keep you on board. And I said, well, I want to go get my master's degree. And they said, well, go hurry up and do it fast and come back. So I asked the director there, Scott Hahn, my program, how fast can I get this done? And he agreed to let me get it done in 10 months, my master's program, because that door was open for me at Catholic Answers. Finished master's in 10 months theology, got back to Catholic Answers, and then told them, hey, I like doing the theology and apologetics, but my heart is with these high school kids. And so started speaking at the high schools, the retreats, the conferences, and before long, it just started snowballing to 100,000 kids a year. And so I was with them for about 14 years, and then we launched out and started Chastity Project from that experience. So we've been running that as a nonprofit since.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Yeah, and I was mentioning to Jason just before about Monsignor Charles Pope, who spoke at the Men's March a couple weeks ago, themensmarch.com. You can find his speech there, and what he is talking about is similar to what Jason was experiencing there, that one of the things we have to be talking about is absolutely the virtue of chastity, and specifically saying, hey, we've got to stop this sin of fornication. Monsignor Pope was very clear with the men at the Men's March. Look, behind the vast majority of these abortions, of these tragedies, is the sin of fornication. And so we've got to reach men, right? We've got to reach men, we've got to reach women, we've got to reach everybody. But the message at the Men's March was men. We've got to reach the men. We've got to help the men to understand their responsibility here, to repent, to take responsibility, to make that new commitment. And that was those were the themes of the Men's March. And so, yes, we need folks on all sides, but it is essential that we have people sharing the truth about human sexuality, human love, the virtue and gift of chastity. And yeah, it's beautiful to hear how that all was kind of coming together and how that all got stitched together. God's hand on that and the graces unfolding. What was that? I've got to ask you, what was that like as that began to snowball and you began to just see, okay, I guess God's grace is with me here. I guess I'll just keep saying yes. That had to be a moment of, well, I guess I'll let you share your reaction, your response when that was happening. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, people often thank me for the ministry that we're doing, but I kind of see our ministry as more God's gift to us than it is ours to him. And it was such a joy to speak at all these schools, and still is. And after the assemblies, I'd tell the kids, hey, if you guys need to hang out and talk afterwards, I'll be here to listen. I gave that invitation at a high school in New York, and the students formed a line 7 hours long. And we were there till 5:30 at night. We had to cut off the line to get to the next talk on time. But there's always, in every culture, we've done this presentation probably more than 3,000 times to more than 2 million people in person on 6 different continents. And we've never had a single disrespectful audience in any of those places. The tough nuts to crack are not the teenagers. It's the faculty. It's the adults who probably aren't practicing chastity in their own lives that have an issue with this, whereas the young people are remarkably receptive, because to me, their minds are made for the truth, their hearts are made for the love, and chastity kind of offers them both. But as you had said at the top of this, there's that the father was talking about, Father Pope, this linkage between unchastity and abortion. I think just as intimately linked is life is to love, lust is just as intimately linked to death in the same way. So just as the natural fruit of love is life, human life, spiritual life, a life of grace, in the same respect, lust is inextricably linked to death. Spiritual death through mortal sin, physical death through whether it be abortion, the higher rates of depression, suicide linked with promiscuity, sexually transmitted diseases, to the death of the body. In that way, these two things are going to be linked together with abortion and lust. That is the fuel of the entire industry. And so if we really want to build a culture that's pro-life, we have to build a culture that's pro-love, teaching the young people the distinction between lust and love. I mean, today we're celebrating the feast of St. John Fisher. I mean, this is a guy who spoke out to Henry VIII over, his problems with unchastity. And John Fisher ended up with his head being hung off the London Bridge for all to see. And so more death linked to lust, because lust in terms of the aggression of the persecution against those teaching chastity. And so we've got to see this clear link that's going on if we're really going to get to the root of the abortion problem. The problem is not simply the supply of abortion. We got to tackle that through legislation and this. That's important. Legislations, yep. But it's not just the supply of abortion that's the problem. It's also the demand for abortion, which is created by people experiencing sexual intimacy without even thinking life is going to come forth from that. And so if we can join together life to love as it should be, then when life comes from love, people aren't shocked and thinking of abortion as somehow the solution to the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very, very well said. And I want to drill down on some of the work you do and give the opportunity for you to proclaim the truth to our audience a bit more in this area, but I do want to take a step back as well and ask you about that discernment of vocation. And specifically, so I guess you were at some point realizing, well, I think God's calling me in the direction of marriage and family. And then it becomes discerning, okay, not just a vocation in general, but specifically marriage to a specific woman. Can you share a little bit about how that all unfolded?
Yeah, I was thinking of a anecdote that happened. I think it was Pope John the 23rd was friends with a young man who might be called to the priesthood, and another bishop knew of this young man. And eventually, the man became a husband and a father. And this bishop broke the news to the Pope. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that this young man chose the trap. And the Pope looked at him and said, look, we don't have 6 sacraments in a trap. We have 7 sacraments. And so marriage is not a distraction from the vocation to the priesthood. And for me with Kristalina, coming to the discovery, she wanted to become a chastity speaker as I had been one. We started sharing our testimony in front of the high school kids together, and the light bulb was going on with these kids. They'd come up afterwards hugging her and crying and dumping their boyfriends, and thought, hey, I think we kind of be a good team doing this. And so started doing that ministry together and have been doing it ever since.
Praise God. All right, when we get back, we're going to keep moving forward here with Jason Evert, and we're going to allow some time to proclaim the truth. We'll be back just after this. Stay tuned.
Here at the Station of the Cross, we proudly bring the truths of the Catholic faith to countless listeners through radio and mobile devices, and we're grateful for the feedback we've received.
I discovered the Station of the Cross rather providentially a year ago and have been a loyal listener ever since. I can't overestimate the value of the station, what it's made a difference in my life in terms of making me better informed Catholic. It has enriched my faith, consoled me during tough times, and made me laugh on several occasions. I commend the important work of this great apostolate.
I'm a stay-at-home mom. I listen to the radio, and if I can listen to something that brings me closer to God, closer to Jesus Christ, then it's the most beautiful thing.
If you've been blessed by listening to the Station of the Cross, let us know. Call 1-877-888-6279, extension 112. Then share your testimonial with us. Each weekday from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern, the Station of the Cross brings you Mother Miriam Live. Mother Miriam is a Catholic nun on a mission to bring Jesus and a message of hope to a world that has lost its way.
Hello, beloved. This is Mother Miriam, and I am thrilled to welcome you to Mother Miriam Live. As always, you're going to be able to call, text, or email whatever your questions are. Through a partnership between the Station of the Cross and LifeSite News, you will be able to listen and watch Mother Miriam Live on YouTube and Facebook at the Station of the Cross, including past episodes on podcast. God bless you.
Listen on your local Station of the Cross affiliate and our free iCatholic Radio mobile app, or watch the Mother Miriam Live video stream on Facebook and YouTube by searching the Station of the Cross. That's Mother Miriam Live each weekday from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
To the Simple Truth. Jim Havens here. Our guest today, Jason Evert, is with us. Chastity Project, chastity.com. And I do want to make a quick plug specifically to some resources that you can find at chastity.com. And that is the Pure Manhood booklet that Jason put together and the Pure Womanhood booklet that centers that this is a resource we can put into people's hands when we interact with them, even passersby that are just walking by, to get this message out there. It is so important. There's a lot of people who have never heard this message of purity, of the virtue of chastity, sexual integrity, all of it. They've just never had the blessing of having someone share this information with them. And God's grace is on it. When we share this information, it's something that he can really use and speak through and speak to their hearts. Their hearts are made for it. So when they read it, it can be like my experience growing up and then turn into the catechism and reading about human sexuality. It was like it was jumping off the page. Like I always knew this was true. I just never had the words. So we've got to share this information out there. Again, go to chastity.com for that. and so much more. But Jason, in this final segment, anywhere else you want to go, anything else you want to share, but I'd love to also just open it up and have you just proclaim any truth that you think would be especially needed in our time right now, to just go ahead and proclaim it.
Yeah, well, I want to encourage the listeners, I think you might think, well, I'm not a chastity speaker, who am I to, share this message? One of the things that we've come to realize in our ministries, like Crystalline and I, we can get to a decent number of people on social media or giving talks or, whatever, but the church militant is so big, in terms of, 1 billion strong in the Catholic Church, and so many Catholics out there know people who need this life-saving message of chastity, but aren't sure, well, how do I deliver this message? Yeah, I know there's a high school down the street, or there's a youth group full of kids, or a crisis pregnancy center that could use some resources. Who am I to bring the message to them? What we've decided that we want to do at chastity.com is to take all the resources that we've created and make everything just dirt cheap. And so like everything on the website, whether it's like a 300-page book or a 30-page booklet, whatever, everything is less than $3 a piece, because we want people to get boxes of these things and just give them away. I know a pro-life worker down in Florida, and he gives to women who are coming to get an ultrasound thinking about having an abortion. He pays them a $100 bill if they're willing to read our book, How to Find Your Soulmate Without Losing Your Soul. He said, if you just read this book, I will pay you $100 cash. And the women are like, okay, I could use that. And so they'll read the books, because so often these women will come in for an abortion, then they're going to come back, in 2 years, and then 4 years and 6 years, having multiple, abortions. So we've got to get to that root. So at chastity.com, all our resources are $3 less. But here's what we've come up with recently is we're going to launch a website probably later this week. We're working on some last minute bugs called missionariesofchastity.com. So if you just go to chastity.com, you'll see the button right there. Click on that link. And the idea behind this is like, who do you want to reach with the message of chastity? And we'll give you the options. You want teens and young adults, or parents and married couples? And you think, well, I want to reach the teens. And then it'll say, you want the boys, the girls, or co-ed? I want co-ed. What do you want to give them the message of? Do you want it to be for public schools, faith-based, or Spanish? And be like, well, I need the faith-based stuff. And then lastly, it'll ask you, what message do you want to bring? Chastity and dating, pornography, LGBTQ questions, what spirituality, what topic do you want? And you think, I want to help the kids with pornography. You click that button and it'll show you all of our resources and say, how many of them do you want? And like, do you want 100? Put 100 in there. 100 these, 200 of those, 50 of those. And then it'll create kind of a GoFundMe page for you on our website. And we're going to say, hey, look, this person out in St. Louis wants to give away 500 free books to the kids in their high schools. Click here to donate to their project. And then we'll announce week, and God willing, we could exponentially, it's kind of a force multiplier. If we can take the assets that God has enabled us to create here and just make them available, tap into the hundreds of thousands of people that follow us on social media and point them all to your projects, it's unreal how many young people we could potentially reach with this message. Because what we're doing together for these young people is really marriage prep, when it should be happening. Marriage prep is not 4 months before you get married. That's like triage. We need to be doing marriage prep when they're 15, 16, 17. Not because they need to get married at 18, but because they need to learn what human love is supposed to look like a decade before they get married and start to grow in those virtues of sacrifice and fidelity and self-control. And so if we as a church just get our act together and have these hearts of apostolic zeal, I think there's no telling how many people we can reach together.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, that is phenomenal and so needed. So thank you so much for that. But yes, everybody make sure that you check out chastity.com, bookmark it, make it a place that you go back to time and time again. Great resources on there as well. We got to build ourselves up in this continued formation as well. One of the things I always love to share when I'm talking about the virtue of chastity is a line that I've heard Jason use in his talk to parents, which is, we wouldn't say it about any other subject. Like, have you had the math talk yet with your kids, right? This is a process. This is something that we have to continue to be intentional about on our own formation and the formation of the young people around us. Jason, anything else to encourage parents right now, or anybody else, anything else that you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, as the parents, just please remember, you're the primary sex educators It's not me. It's not the church. It's not the school. It's not the government. Like, it's the parents. Like, you are the primary sex educator. Don't wait for your kid to come to you with some chastity-related question. You need to go form them. You need to give them resources. You need to initiate these conversations. You need to set up internet security in your house so they're not stumbling into all this garbage. And you might think, well, look, I'm a busy parent. I don't know how to set up, privacy settings, notification, adults. I don't know how to set that up on the kid's Droid or phone or what or this or that. So a couple resources you can use. One, if you just text the word safe to the number 66866. So type in like you're sending a text message. For the number, type in 66866. And then for the message, just write the word safe and click send. You'll get a message back saying, what's your email? And you'll get sent every day for a week a little 4-minute video that'll explain for free how to set up phone, internet, screen security for your entire family. It'll walk you through A to Z, because it's like you're living in a bad neighborhood. It doesn't matter if you lock the front door. They're coming in the back. Lock the back door. They're coming in the windows. You got to seal off the chimney, the basement, all these portals of entry, and that little video program for free will give that to you. Also, covenanteyes.com will block the porn off your kids' phones and send you a report every day. Get covenanteyes.com. If you type in the promo code Chastity, you can use that for a month for free at Covenant Eyes. And then lastly, Focus on the Family has a website called pluggedin.com. Pluggedin.com will give you movie, television, video game, and music reviews. So if your kid says, oh, can we see that movie this weekend? Can we watch Game of Thrones? You're going to be like, no, that's porn. Here's why. And then you can explain. Get those. If the kid wants a video game, you better go to pluggedin.com and review it before you buy that for the kids. Because some of them look very innocent, but there can be full-on porn that you're bringing into your house on these little race car video games. And so be made aware. Go to pluggedin.com, covenanteyes.com, and then check out the resources we've got at chastity.com.
Outstanding. Any final tip that you can give to husbands and fathers today, being a husband and a father, in terms of just leading your family in your faith, stepping up and doing what you're called to do as a father of a family?
Yeah, I just finished a 33-day consecration of St. Joseph called Custos, C-U-S-T-O-S. It's by Devin Shad. It's an incredible consecration of St. Joseph where he gives you so many awesome practical tips on how to be a father on earth like the Father in heaven. So just Google Custos, C-U-S-T-O-S, by Devin Shad, and do that 33-day journey. It's been incredible for me, and I know you'll love it as well.
Outstanding. It's always a great blessing to hear from Jason Evert and to hear the story behind the man, as well as get some great resources from you. Thank you so much for being with us today, Jason.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's it for The Simple Truth today. Tune back in tomorrow, 4 p.m. We're going to have Jennifer Robach-Morse with us. And, that's going to be a good discussion. So we'll see you then. God bless you.